Hi, I'm Damon with Blink UX, and it's my pleasure to introduce the next speaker, a fellow interaction designer who's been generously sharing his design wisdom and wisecracks since the dawn of the millennium. He's the author of 4 books, including last year's Microinteractions, which is also the title of his talk. And people have been raving about it on Amazon. I thought I'd just share 2 quotes, 2 titles of Amazon reviews. One says, Microinteractions, macro beneficial. So I hope that's true. And the other says, and I like this one, the devil is in the details, but so are the angels. So please welcome Dan Saffer.
All right. Microinteractions, last talk of the day. Let's talk tiny things. Let's talk small things. How I started thinking about this was for the last 10 years, people in the design industry have focused on big things, focused on designing massive systems and environments and cities and landscapes and big ecosystems. And for me, all that stuff is great, and I really enjoy that stuff, but it's not, design to me isn't only about solving these massive, wicked problems. There's something really pleasurable, something really interesting, something really great about small details that delight. If you focus only on the kind of big systems and you don't look at all the little things, a really important thing is lost, and I think that's a lot of the humanity. And I think that it's the details that really start to bring humanity to the products and services that we design. And by focusing on these little details, I think you can really start to change the world, not from the top down, but from the bottom up, from all these little things. So that's what this talk is all about. And I'm going to start with a little story here, and this is Avery Fisher Hall. Any New Yorkers in the audience? Oh, a couple. So, ever been to Avery Fisher Hall? It's awesome. It's gorgeous. It's beautiful. It's one of those places where people pay thousands and thousands of dollars and wait for years for the orchestra seats in this venue. I'm going to take you back almost exactly 3 years ago, January 2012. It was a very cold Wednesday night, and the symphony orchestra that night, the New York Philharmonic, was playing what you're hearing right now, which is Mahler's Ninth. And Mahler's Ninth, for those of you who aren't musicologists, it's a very quiet, very peaceful piece of music. It lasts about an hour, and some people even think that it's Mahler's send-off to the world. And the audience that night had been listening for almost an hour, and they had reached the Adagio movement, which is what you're hearing right now, which ends the piece. And then this happened. Someone's phone kept going off over and over and over. And the conductor stopped the orchestra, and I'll stop it so that you don't rush the stage. But the conductor stopped the orchestra, and that almost never happens. And the audience, which had been so quiet and so peaceful, burst into chaos. People were standing up and shouting. It was just a riot. And the gentleman who was responsible, and the Avery Fisher Hall started calling him Patron X, so that the other patrons wouldn't seek retribution against this guy. Poor Patron X had only gotten his iPhone the day before, and he had assumed, as you could logically assume, that when he turned the ringer off, that it turned off all the alarms. But that's not how iPhones work. But what was fascinating about this is that, well, sure, of course, first there were jokes. You know, people started saying, you know, I changed my ringtone to play Mahler's Ninth just in case, stuff like that. But people actually started to debate what should really happen when the ringer turns off. So some people said, you know what, Patron X was right. When you turn that ringer off, it should turn off everything. Then the fault is on you. But other people are like, no, that's crazy. The minute that you do that, you're going to have millions of people oversleeping every night because they go to bed with their phones on mute. I would be still asleep upstairs in my hotel room if that had been the case. But what's fascinating is that this made it to the New York Times. That's how I first heard about it. And silencing your phone is a great example of a micro-interaction. It's a little piece of functionality that almost no one cares about until it's really important. It is something that does one thing and does one thing really well, and it can make or break the user experience. And once you start thinking about products in terms of all these micro-interactions, you start to see them everywhere. They're in the appliances in our house, the apps on our phone, and our laptops. They're everywhere if you start looking around for these little pieces of functionality. And here's just a list of some of the things that micro-interactions are. These little contained moments, everything from changing a setting, giving a rating, all the way down through things like search. And I think if we're honest about how we design, a lot of this stuff is the stuff that we save for last. Or we're like, oh no, I got to make another login screen. Or oh man, I got to change a setting. But these things, which could be so completely overlooked, can also be moments for real delight. And when you start looking for them, so this is the top of my laptop screen, and it is entirely micro-interactions. All of those things are triggers for micro-interactions. Micro-interactions can also power entire apps. So things like ConvertBot here. ConvertBot, it does one thing and does it well. It converts one number to another. You can also see micro-interactions in things like this Breville toaster. This toaster, it toasts. It does that really well. But if the toast pops up and it needs a little bit more toasting, there's actually a button that says a little bit more. And you press that and it toasts a little bit more. Somebody thought through what it was like to toast and made this really great micro-interaction on this toaster. So what are micro-interactions good for? So for me, they're, again, not an exhaustive list, but a list of some things. Everything from controlling an ongoing process, things like volume, all the way down to turning a feature or function on or off, or turning your product on or off. In fact, the first kind of interaction of any kind that people usually have with your product is when they turn it on. That's the very first thing that starts to set up the entire user experience. What is that first moment like? So here's a couple examples. So this is from Facebook, of course. So if someone posts on your timeline and it's in a language that's not your default, it pops up this little, hey, see translation. Of course, the like button on Facebook, famous, very famous micro-interaction, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. This is from YouTube, and the favicon actually changes whether you're playing or downloading or have something pause. So if you're wondering on your 500 tabs which one is actually playing the song, you can actually find it out through this little micro-interaction. And I love this little one from Apple. So when you trigger the speech and dictation, if the fans in your laptop are going, because the laptop is hot, it'll actually lower the fans so that the sound of the fans doesn't interfere with the speech and dictation. It's a really nice little micro-interaction there. And here's basically my thesis. If you care about the user experience, you should care about micro-interactions, because the difference between a product that you love and one that you simply tolerate are often the micro-interactions that you have with it. That's the big difference. And you don't have to take my word for it. Stuff like this started to appear after the book came out. People saying, oh, hey, I focus on our micro-interactions and it grew our traffic, immensely. Or you start to see startups that, hey, they take things that are pretty standard, like mail, and they make an app like Mailbox, and they focus on the microinteractions, and it gets acquired very quickly. You also see things like this, like Slate Plus. Slate is starting to charge a little bit more for basically a set of microinteractions that make their service a little bit better. So it's an interesting strategy around microinteractions. And if you care about the user experience, you should care about these things. And again, you don't have to trust my word for it. How about trusting Jerry Seinfeld? This is when Jerry met an Olympic runner whose alarm clock had failed him.
Oh, hi, Jean-Paul. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Sorry about the Olympics.
Me too.
Listen, I'm going to go call work, see if I can get my deadline extended. I can't come up with anything for this thing.
Catalog writer's block?
Yeah, that's funny.
So what happened? A snooze alarm, wasn't it?
No, man, it wasn't a snooze. Most people think it was the snooze, but no. No snooze.
AM, PM.
Man, it wasn't the AM, PM. It was the volume.
Ah, the volume.
Yes, the volume. There was a separate knob for the radio alarm.
Oh, separate knob.
Yes, separate knob. Why separate knob? Why separate knob?
Some people like to have the radio alarm a little louder than the radio.
Oh, please, man, please.
So we talk a lot about look and feel in this industry, and what I'm proposing is we know what look is, we know what visual design is, we know what that's all about, we know what branding is all about. But microinteractions are the feel part. When we talk about look and feel, microinteractions are the feel in look and feel. And if all those little feeling parts, if all those microinteractions are terrible, the main features, if they're surrounded by all these problems, it's not a great product. I call it the hole in your shoe effect, where you can have this really beautiful shoe, but if there's a hole in it or there's a rock in it, man, you don't want to wear that thing. It's a pain. And I think we saw a really great example of this with the original G1 version of the Android phone, where you could make calls, you could send texts, you could download apps, you could do all the things that you would think that you would be able to do on a phone, but all the microinteractions are really wonky. Like the search didn't work sometimes, deleting things was inconsistent. Some of the applications, pressing the back button did weird things. So the microinteractions were very strange, and as a result, I think there was a problem with adoption. But as they started to focus on those, adoption started to go up, and I don't think that's coincidental. So experience design, for me, is this ability to work at multiple levels. Of course, you're going to have strategy. Of course, you need to know what the product is for and who it's for. But it's also awesome to dive down into the details and work at that level to make sure that the experience is really well done. And I think if you do it well, these microinteractions can become signature moments. They can become part of your brand. So we talked a little bit about the Facebook like. If Facebook came out with a new product that didn't have the like button, you'd be like, where's the like button? This thing's broken. Like, there's no Facebook like button. It's become part of their brand. There's T-shirts that say, like on it. There's other examples.
Mail.
You've got mail. You've got mail has almost outlasted AOL, right? I mean, they made a movie called You've Got Mail. It's a signature moment for them. It's something really important. This is an example from Smart Design from a tool for surgeons. And this tool, Ethicon, it was designed to make this really easy way for surgeons in the operating room to use this tool. So microinteractions can definitely be enterprise as well. So interestingly, we designed a sound cue for them that became a signature moment. See if you can hear it.
While surgeons use the audio feedback from the machine to actually improve how they use the tools.
It's very intuitive. The tone tells you when to stop, when to start, when you're actually in a sweet zone. So it kind of guides you through the surgical procedure. And then you hear the last tone, it tells me I'm done.
It saves them time because they know exactly when to start cutting. Sometimes they even sing along with the final chime at the end.
So if you can get surgeons to sing along with the final chime, you're doing something right. So now hopefully I've convinced you that it is worth spending time thinking about and focusing on these details. Now I'm going to talk about how you actually go about designing them, how you go about diagnosing them, thinking about them, and designing them. And this is the model that I've come up with, the Microinteractions model, and it has 4 parts. There's a trigger, something happens that starts the microinteraction. There's the rules, the interaction part, what happens basically. There's feedback, which tells you what the rules are. And then loops and modes, which are kind of the meta rules for the entire microinteraction. And I'll get into each one of these in some detail. So the first is trigger. And so the first part of any microinteraction is that something happens. And there's really 2 kinds of triggers. There's manual triggers and there's system triggers. And I'll talk about manual triggers first. These are the ones that we as designers are most used to. So manual triggers are things like buttons, knobs, dials, icons, links, these kinds of things that actually a user is manually triggering some kind of action to happen. And the question I ask myself is, in this context, what's the proper control for when people are looking to perform a task? What's the thing that people are going to look for and try to do, and how can I present that to them in the most discoverable way? So here's just some examples. The iPhone lock screen has got the camera. So if you touch the camera, the whole thing slides up so that you can then take a picture. Slide to unlock, of course, a signature moment for Apple as well. Things like filling in forms can also be a manual trigger. This is an example from the Discus signup. So when you start to actually type in your email address, it starts to actually guess what your name is from your email address. This is an interesting manual trigger, and this one's from Tumblr. When you actually type a question into your Tumblr post, it actually brings up a little checkbox that says, "Hey, do you want to let people answer this?" It's a really nice little manual trigger there. Now, not all manual triggers have to be visible as well. You can also use microinteractions to create things that are invisible triggers. Things like, and this another example from Tumblr. This is Tumblr for Android. If you press and hold the post button at the top, you get this nice radial menu that appears that lets you choose from the 2 most popular types of Tumblr posts, either an image or a piece of text. So for people who are more power users, this is a nice invisible trigger that's right there for them. This is another interesting one from Akismet. So Akismet, if you right-click on their logo, you actually get this little pop-up window that actually says, "Hey, you're looking for the logo? Here it is, and here's all the sizes that you could have," which is really interesting that they get enough people that were looking for the logo to make this worthwhile. But I thought it's a really interesting invisible trigger from something that obviously must happen quite a lot. Now, while I really enjoy manual triggers, I think that we're kind of in the era of system triggers. And system triggers are when a set of conditions are made, and the system then responds with some kind of microinteraction. So the question I always ask is, what is it that the system can intuit about user need just from what the user is doing and provide them with some kind of microinteraction? The obligatory example from Nest here, although this is Nest Protect. So the annoying thing about having a smoke detector, a normal smoke detector, is that they often go off and you're like, what one of these smoke detectors is actually going off? I can't tell. But the nice thing about Nest is that they have a thing called Nightly Promise, so that as you turn the light off, it glows green and just says, "Hey, I'm cool," if there's a problem, it actually glows red and lets you know, hey, there's an issue. And then you can there's actually a manual trigger that you can walk up and wave your hand under it, and it'll actually tell you what's wrong with it, if it needs its battery changed or whatever. But it's a really nice, very basic kind of system trigger that I think is really well done. I love this one from the Deliveries app. So Deliveries app, if you go into the app and you have a delivery code in your clipboard, it actually brings this pop-up up and says, hey, you got a delivery? I've detected one that's in your clipboard. Do you want to add it to your delivery list? Which is great because it doesn't start from zero. It guesses something about you and offers you this option to add it. Where otherwise you'd have to go add and paste and those kinds of things. It's smart. It's guessing you might need this and offering up this little micro interaction. I love this one as well from Instapaper, where if you're reading on your phone and your hand starts to tilt and it starts to go into landscape mode and you jerk your hand back, it actually brings up this little thing that says, hey, do you want to lock rotation? It's really nice because I don't have to go into settings. I don't have to go do, I don't have to hunt for something. And it'll vanish if I'm like, yeah, no. But it's also nice that it noticed some piece of action that I was already doing and trying to help me out. I made a bunch of principles when I was thinking about microinteractions. And this is really the first one, which is bring the data forward. What data is inside your product that could be brought forward and maybe displayed in some kind of microinteraction, or the display itself could be a microinteraction. I thought about this every time that I looked at the Apple Weather app and was like, wow, what a waste of potential space there. It could, it's only 73 and sunny in Cupertino every day. I mean, certainly not in Seattle every day. So for me, it's like, why, and it's gotten, this is how it kind of is now. But it's infuriating because it's such a missed opportunity. I thought Microsoft really capitalized on that missed opportunity with things like live tiles in Windows Mobile, where you can see things like, the messaging app here, the face turns from a smiley face to a frowny face if there's some kind of problem with the messages. Google Chrome, it'll actually tell you how many downloads that you have going on and the status of those downloads, all without you having to go in and look for it. It presents it in a really nice way. One nice thing about bringing the data forward is bringing data forward that you didn't even know that you needed to know. So this is an example from Amazon. I went to make a subscription to get razor blades, and I had no idea how often I bought razor blades. It was not a piece of data that I had personally tracked over time. But it actually showed me, like, hey, the delivery here, the most common is every 4 months. So that's what I chose. I'm like, oh, well, I guess it's every 4 months, and I can adjust it if that's not true. But it was a piece of data I didn't even know that I needed to know until they presented it to me. Similarly, this is TaskRabbit. So TaskRabbit is when you can hire people to come over and do your laundry and stuff like that. So when they did a redesign about 1.5 years ago, they started to add in this data that said, hey, for the most common, for whatever task that you were doing, here's what most people in your area are paying for it. They brought the data forward, and that was a really, really nice thing. Once a microinteraction has been triggered, something happens, and that's when the rules come in. The rules are really kind of a set of behavior that determine what can be done and what can't be done. I don't really like the term rules, but I think of it as kind of the rules of the game. How do you play this microinteraction? How does this microinteraction work? And so here's a list, again, not at all comprehensive, but some of the things that the rules determine. Everything from what happens right after the microinteraction is triggered to all the way down to what happens when the microinteraction ends. How does this thing interact at all? What are the sequence of events? So here's a really easy example. So one of the easiest microinteractions there are. One of the simplest ones, turning on a lamp. So what are the rules of a lamp? So, I turn on a light switch, and it stays on until somebody turns it off or the light burns out. Very simple. But if I add a motion detector to it, all of a sudden the rules become a lot more complicated. So, hey, it needs to check for movement. Oh, is something moving? Oh, yes, something's moving. Is it a cat or is it a human being? Oh, it's just a cat, so don't turn on. Oh, it is a human being. Oh, let's turn on. And then, is there still movement? Oh, no, 30 seconds ago. Oh, turn the lights off. Now, I guarantee you that everyone in this room has been on the receiving end of these rules in a bathroom somewhere when the lights have gone out and you're frantically waving to find where the sensor is on the ceiling to turn this back on. So maybe in that context, the 30 seconds of no movement, no pun intended there, should be farther delayed. Of course, we're now in the area of Internet of Things, and those things keep getting more and more complicated.
Turn the switch on.
As in LifeX here, light
connects
bulbs.
to your Wi-Fi network and blinks green when it's good to go.
Maybe
We've
too
also
complicated.
finished the switching, dimming, and color changing controls. You can also use your phone to dim your lights.
That's pretty cool. Microinteractions can also tie your ecosystem together. And the rules in particular can tie your ecosystem together. So this is an example from Spotify. So Spotify, if I'm listening to something on my laptop, I start up Spotify on my phone, it pauses my laptop, starts playing the exact same song on my phone right where I left off. It makes it seem like a seamless service and not two separate apps. Now, I imagine that this was a really kind of straightforward thing for the designers to come up with, but I bet this is actually a really technically difficult challenge, and I think it's really cool that they managed to pull it off. I love, love, love this microinteraction from HelloFax. So, yes, people still do fax, number one. Number two, HelloFax is basically a service where you get a number of free pages a month to fax out. But I love this, that you have 2 pages left, this fax is 3 pages long. We're going to let you slide on this one. I love it because it is so much like something that the human being down the street at your local fax store, whatever that is, might do for you, right? They would let you slide. And again, I think that this was something, I know there was probably a lot of debates about this. Like, why are we letting people do this? How often are we going to let people slide? Or, is it going to be every month? Is it going to be, but I love it because it's so human. It makes you like really have so much goodwill for this service that I think it's just an amazing, amazing little moment of delight there. The rules can also prevent people from abusing your product. This is What Do You Love by Google, and it's, as you can tell, a happy, shiny rainbow world where you're supposed to put in things that you really love at the top, and then it tells you a little bit about them. But let's say that one were to put something in there that was, inappropriate. What would that do? Well, the rules will change it to kittens. You can't put anything in there that's offensive or anything like that without it changing it to kittens. The rules will just turn it over and make it so that you can't abuse their really nice rainbow product. Here's another principle for microinteractions: preventing human error. Microinteractions can do a lot to prevent human errors from ever occurring or catching them when they do occur. This is the kind of classic one, the Google Gmail, hey, did you mean to attach files? Oh, because you've written, I've attached this file, but then didn't attach something. So it's creepy, right? But because Google's reading your mail, but so is the NSA. So we might as well get something good out of it, like this, which I think is actually very helpful. The one thing that would actually make this even more helpful is if they actually had a way to choose the file right in this pop-up, so that you could just pick the file right there and go. How about this one from Make Me a Cocktail, which I hope to be saying at the bar very soon. But Make Me a Cocktail is a place to suggest cocktails. But if you don't put anything into the search field and you press search, it'll just suggest the cocktails for you. It just assumes you're drunk already and just says, hey, here's a mint julep. Here's something else for you. Rather than just give you a no results found, it actually tries to solve the problem for you. Same deal here with Meetup.com. When there are no search results found, it actually tweaks your search parameters a little bit to try to find a match for you, so that it just doesn't give you like, you know what, we couldn't find anything. I love all my design principles here, but this is the one that I think is the best and most powerful, which is don't start from zero. In almost every microinteraction, almost every product, you know something about the user. You know something about the context. You know something about the time of day. You know something about the platform. You know something that can make this thing better. So here's some examples of not starting from zero. This is one of my favorite apps, Waze. Waze, when I come out of my building and I get in my car and I turn on Waze, it says, hi, Dan, are you driving home? And I never told it to do this. I never suggested it. It just watched me do it 5 or 6 days in a row. And then it started to say, you know what, every day you do the same thing. Now I can say like, no, cancel. I'm actually going out tonight. Or if I don't do anything, it'll just plot me a route just in 16 seconds. I don't even have to touch the app itself. I can be buckling my thing and turning the car on. It just does it. It makes this really smart suggestion because it didn't start from zero. It started learning my behavior just by watching what I already did and suggested something. You can also make little suggestions based on other kinds of contexts, like the date. So this is pro flowers. So rather than normally when you go to a flower site, you're like, what's Mother's Day again? You have to go and type that into Google to find that, and then come back and put it in. But here they actually say like, oh, here's what the next date is that you may be interested. Now I don't know who's sending their dad flowers on Father's Day, but you could see on other days that it might be very helpful to have the date right there. Just general knowledge is also a way to not start from zero. We know that all credit cards start with a particular number. So you should never have to select a credit card type ever. You should just be able to start to type in the number like it does here on GitHub, and it will select the credit card type for you. I mean, the only it's a little misleading here because it looks like you have to select, but actually they're just telling you, hey, here's the ones that we select, that we have, that you can use here. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. So, as the case of Patron X, beginning of this talk told you, people don't necessarily know the rules of the stuff that they own. The only way to really know the rules is through the feedback that are provided. The rules are invisible. The rules are hidden in code. People don't know what that is. It's only through feedback that we absolutely understand what's going on. So feedback is this thing that allows us to understand and learn how to play the microinteraction, how to play this app. So here's a couple really nice examples. This is the Twitter password picker, and it's a really clear indication of, hey, here's some passwords that are kind of weak. These are what are really good, and it just shows you as you're typing. It shows you kind of what the rule system is in the background. MailChimp takes that to another level. MailChimp here, and this is Freddie the MailChimp. And MailChimp, for those of you who don't know, it's a service for sending out email newsletters. Now, Freddie here says that the newsletters should be about 600 pixels wide. That's what he recommends. Now, you can stretch Freddie. You can stretch the email. Freddie starts to complain. He says, "Stop it! This is actually too big. You don't want to make the email this big." If you keep going, oh, poor Freddie's arm actually pops off to show you. Don't worry, Freddie's fine. He's just a cartoon character. But it's a graphic illustration of the rules. Now, obviously, this isn't going to work for everyone's brand, but it's a really nice illustration of showing, how something with some humor can actually show you kind of the hidden parts of a system. Of course, feedback doesn't always have to be visual. This is a set of sounds that GE made for their high-end GE Cafe line, and it's a really nice set of a whole design language around particular sound types and sound feedback. You get the idea. The next principle I want to talk about is using the overlooked. In the type of design that we do, we have lots of stuff. We've got buttons, we've got sliders, we've got pop-up windows, we've got all this stuff, all this UI Chrome, and we can use it. We can use it better to provide more feedback rather than just adding something else onto the screen. So if you think about things like this from Coda 2, they turned the button, the Process My Order button, into the progress bar. They actually just used that rather than putting something else on the screen. Now, why they didn't change it to be, processing your order or something like that, which would have made some sense, but still, they used the overlooked. Rather than put something else there, they used what was already there. This is another example from Chrome. So Chrome, if you type in a word, it'll actually use the scroll bar along the side to show you where instances of that word are within the document, rather than putting up one more pop-up or something like that to show you where it might be. You can also use animation as a way to indicate things. This is from Cornerstone, and the little spokes on that wheel that are right there that are normally spinning when they are spinning actually shows you the number of processes that are working in the background right now that are working to create whatever it is that Cornerstone creates. Speaking human. Human beings like to be spoken to in the language that they're used to, in the language that they're used to hearing. If you have a technical audience, speak tech to them. If you have a non-technical audience, don't speak tech to them. People like to hear things written and spoken to them in ways that they understand. People also respond to things like faces. This is the Threadless shopping cart. If you put something in the shopping cart, it gets a smiley face on it. The Mr. Boxy falls asleep if you've got no network connection. Of course, you can take this to an extreme like Google did here with the Gmail iPhone app, where you could put, Mr. Smiley Face Son with a kind of ambiguous message, like, you've got no mail, you loser, have a nice day. It's kind of a weird juxtaposition. But I really like the idea of having a little bit of veneer of personality. A little of this does go a really long way. But Dropbox here, if you've got a really long upload, it recommends, hey, maybe you should grab a Snickers while you're waiting. Or this from Google Voice. If you type a really long message to be sent, it counts the characters up to a point, and then it says, really, really. The last part of microinteractions are loops and modes. And these are kind of the meta rules for microinteractions. How often does it repeat? Are there different parts to it? How does it all work? I won't say too much about modes, because for the most part, my recommendation is to avoid them unless you have some kind of infrequent task that requires that you switch into a mode. So something like picking the weather where you want your weather from your weather app. Something like that is a very good mode. But loops, I think, are more interesting in that how often does your app repeat? Or are there things that over time that start to happen that, hey, you may want to bring out a microinteraction or change your microinteraction? So this is from Ted. If you're watching a streaming video and it notices that you're buffering a lot, it actually says, hey, maybe you just want to download this because there's obviously a problem. Facebook, if you start adding a lot of friends too quickly, it starts to say, hey, are you real? Like it brings up a CAPTCHA, just to prove, hey, are you really a human being? And the last principle that I have is this one of using long loops. What happens when someone comes back to your app the second time, the third time, the 1,000th time? How does the app change? How does the microinteractions change? What are there microinteractions that can appear over time that enhance your product? So things like Spotify, when you add things to a Spotify playlist, the date on them at first is very bright, and then over time it kind of fades away. You can have loops, long loops that are years long. So every year Foursquare says, hey, thanks for playing every year. This is your second anniversary, your third anniversary. Another Chrome example. So Chrome, when you get an update in Chrome, it posts this bright green update icon up in the corner. But if you don't touch it for a while, it starts to rot. It's like it turns this kind of sickly yellow, like, hey, you're overdue for an update. It can also do things like preventing errors. So if you've already bought something in the past, you could have a long loop. So in this case, on eBay, it says, hey, you've already bought this. Do you want to buy another? It changes the buy button to buy another. Or Threadless tells you, hey, an item in your cart is about to run out. Maybe you want to do something about that. Another kind of experimental thing that I think is really interesting around long loops is this idea of progressive reduction. Can you start to change your interface and get rid of some things, perhaps, as your users become more experienced? So on Layer Vault, so when you first get the Layer Vault, it has these kind of very bright, very big, very bold buttons with labels. But as you get more experience, it actually starts to remove some of the chrome. It gets rid of the label, and the button starts to be a lot more subtle. I think this is a really interesting place to start thinking about long loops. So that's the 4 parts to microinteractions, and I hope that when you think about microinteractions, even if you have existing ones, and I'm sure you do, that you can use these 4 pieces to really start to diagnose, wow, why is this so dull? Maybe we need a system trigger, or maybe the rules need to. Is there something that we can do that's so that we don't start from 0 here? Or hey, maybe the feedback. Maybe we need multiple channels on the feedback. Or hey, maybe there should be a long loop here that really changes the whole interaction when you've come back the second time or times in the past. But I think it's important to really start, looking at micro interactions as part of your process. And the easiest way is simply, start to look for them and categorize, when you find them, oh, this could be a micro interaction, this could be a signature moment, this could be something really important. Another way to really think about it is to treat everything as a micro interaction. Treat all of your features as a micro interaction. Break them down so that one micro interaction triggers another micro interaction. So that all your features can have these kind of small, delightful details. And this is a way of working that goes back kind of in design history to industrial design, where people like the Ames were saying, hey, the details are the design. That's what makes it special. And people like Dieter Rams are saying, my heart is always in the design. That's where my heart is always in these details because that's the essence of the design. And I think if we think back to the very beginning of this talk, the disastrous story of Patron X, I think, reminds us that these little things make a difference because they show quality at their heart. They show that someone actually cares about the user, cares about their needs, cares about what they're thinking about, cares that they're dealing with a quality product. And people can sense that, even if they can't tell what it is that's making them feel that way. These microinteractions, they are that feel part in look and feel. And I think if we start looking at these details and start treating them with the respect I think they deserve, it is just one way for all of us to really change the world from the bottom up by thinking small. Thank you.